So when you get to 4, it would be exactly the same. You'd be folding your line between 3 and 4, which actually is already folded because we did that in the beginning, so we would neaten up this side. But one thing I want to show you here is when you have a floppy piece. And so floppy, I call it this way. So you've got a seam there, and the length of the fabric goes all the way down. So your seam is there, and as you can see, this piece is sort of flopping around a little bit because it's loose. And my issue with that is that when you go to either trim your seam allowance here or sew the seam, it's very easy for this piece to move. And the less movement we have, the more accuracy we have. So I'm just going to glue baste it in place with a tiny bit of glue. So the first thing you need to just have an idea of is where that seam line is. So let's just fold that side back. And then we'll know where this piece goes to. So I'm just going to give it one little thin stripe and just put it in place. And the beauty of that is now I can move it around and it's not going to shift. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance here. And this is now going to be the next seam because it's the seam we've done 1, 2, and 3. So it's the seam between 3 and 4. So that's the next seam that will come up. And when I move my fabric around, because I've basted this, it won't come undone. One can also machine baste with like a number 4 or 5 stitch. You can just run a seam down the middle of it. And sometimes I'll do that as well. This one's not such a big deal. It's not such a massive piece. But sometimes you'll find you'll have, like a seam sewn up here and this long piece coming down. And then basting is really, really helpful, either machine basting or glue basting. So for number 4, as you can see, it's exactly the same. We've got our seam allowance. We take our fabric and we put it right side down. And we will sew along that seam there, which will then start to make our E come into place.